Call us mean and nasty, but if defending our sovereignty, our economy, and our future makes us that, then Canada wears it like armor. That's not a tweet. That's not a protest chant. That's the tone now echoing from Parliament Hill to provincial capitals across the country. Why? Because Canada just did something it rarely does. We walked away from a U.S. trade deal, and this isn't just posturing. This is a defining moment. Prime Minister Mark Carney, backed by every premier from coast to coast, announced that Canada will not accept a trade agreement that sells out our industries, undermines our independence, or bows to economic blackmail. In his words, no deal is better than a bad deal. And make no mistake, this deal was bad. With threats of 35% tariffs on Canadian goods looming as early as August 1st, Washington wasn't negotiating. It was cornering us. But this time, Canada didn't flinch. Instead, we drew a red line and we stood behind it. You might be wondering, what does that actually mean for you? Well, this isn't just a government versus government squabble. This is about your job, your cost of living, and your ability to rely on Canadian-made goods and energy. It's about not being at the mercy of American politics every time they decide to change the rules. And here's the kicker. This story isn't over. In fact, it's just getting started. Behind this walkway is a massive shift in how Canada sees itself and how we plan to operate going forward. Pipelines, rail corridors, new alliances, there's a full-blown economic realignment happening right now. So, if you care about where Canada's headed, hit like, tap subscribe, and stay with us because what's coming next will reshape the country. And trust me, you're going to want to understand it before it changes everything. For years, Canada played by the rules. We showed up. We negotiated in good faith. We made concessions through rough waves of American tariffs on steel, aluminum, lumber. We didn't retaliate with force. We waited. We hoped diplomacy would win, but hope isn't a strategy. And in 2025, the moment came when patience turned into pressure, and pressure became a breaking point. The United States announced its intent to slap 35% tariffs on a sweeping list of Canadian goods effective August 1st, not just on luxury items or niche sectors, but on essentials. This was not a policy disagreement. This was a punch to the economic gut. And it worked, at least in the short term. It rattled markets. It sent a chill through exporters. And for a brief moment, it looked like Canada might buckle. But then something remarkable happened. Instead of backing down, Prime Minister Mark Carney stood firm. Surrounded by every provincial and territorial leader, he said what no Canadian leader in recent memory had the guts to say. We are not desperate. We are deliberate. No deal is better than a bad deal. And just like that, the tone shifted. This wasn't about trade anymore. It was about pride, about sovereignty, about refusing to be strong-armed by a neighbor that had become increasingly unpredictable, aggressive, and erratic in its economic behavior. This was the moment Canada flipped the script. The walk away wasn't a retreat. It was a reset. And that moment, that unified, deliberate decision to walk, was the turning point. Because when Washington realized it couldn't rely on our silence, when it saw our leaders aligning instead of arguing, something changed. This wasn't the Canada that waited for instructions. This was a Canada with a plan. And now that the tables are turning, the world is watching. It started with one decision, but what followed was even more surprising. After Canada walked away from the U.S. trade deal, something almost unheard of began to unfold. Unity. Historically, Canadian provinces have rarely spoken with one voice, especially when it comes to energy, trade, and national infrastructure. Alberta wants pipelines. Quebec wants green energy. Ontario wants manufacturing protections. Coordination. That was wishful thinking. But not anymore. Faced with a clear and escalating economic threat from the United States, Canada's premiers stopped jockeying for position and started aligning behind a common message. Enough is enough. At the Council of the Federation, leaders from Alberta, Ontario, and Saskatchewan, alongside others, didn't argue over who deserved funding. They committed to building a Canada-first economic corridor, pipelines, rail lines, and trade routes that run east to west, not north to south. Infrastructure designed to connect provinces to each other and to the world, not just to the U.S. This wasn't just posturing, it was policy in motion. Premier Doug Ford laid it out plainly. We match tariff for tariff, dollar for dollar. We hit back because weakness invites more pressure, but strength earns respect. Danielle Smith echoed that with a bigger vision. Canadian oil and natural gas moving to Thunder Bay, James Bay, and out to Europe, bypassing U.S. bottlenecks entirely. These are no longer theoretical ideas. They're entering serious talks, and the public is behind them. Polls show over 70% of Canadians support interprovincial energy corridors. Even in provinces like Quebec, support for pipelines is now in the majority. That tells us something fundamental has shifted. This is no longer a country divided by geography or political lines. This is a federation aligning around survival, around independence, around strategy. The walkway triggered a response more powerful than any tariff, a unified Canada ready to take control of its economic destiny. And that unity, it's laying the groundwork for something even more critical, the fight for energy independence. That's what we'll unpack next. Let's get real. This isn't just about trade. This is about energy. And energy is power, the kind that fuels homes, runs industries, and strengthens nations, but also the kind that can be used against you if you don't control it. Right now, Canada remains deeply dependent on the United States to get our oil and gas to market. We pump it out of Alberta, but we send it south to American refineries, hoping for fair prices, praying for stable politics, and constantly bracing for delays, shutdowns, or outright bans. And the Americans know it. That's what makes us vulnerable. One threat to shut down Line 5, one tariff on crude or LNG, and entire sectors of our economy start to wobble. Premier Danielle Smith called it out directly. We need to own our supply chain from the wellhead to the refinery without having to beg. That's where her push for A-only pipeline comes in. A route that moves oil and gas from Alberta to Thunder Bay or James Bay, feeding eastern refineries and shipping it to Europe, all without crossing a single inch of American land. It's not fantasy, it's strategic planning. Arctic routes are opening due to climate shifts. Icebreakers are available. The technology is here. And with Europe desperate for reliable democratic sources of energy, the demand is real. But this isn't just about exports. It's about survival. Because every time we rely on a foreign pipeline, a foreign port, or a foreign policy, we gamble with our future. Imagine a Canada where no governor in Michigan, no president in Washington can shut down our economy with a signature. That's the vision. That's the mission. Energy independence isn't a luxury anymore. It's a national security requirement. But building that vision will take more than speeches. It will take strategy, policy clarity, and investment confidence. And that's exactly what we'll dive into next. Because the economic strategy behind this energy shift may be the most important story you haven't heard yet. So how do we actually get this done? How do we move from vision to action, especially when billion-dollar projects don't just run on passion, they run on confidence? That's the missing piece right now. And it's why Canada's energy sector, despite being resource-rich and globally relevant, still feels stuck. The private sector isn't holding back because they don't believe in the opportunity. They're holding back because they don't believe the federal system will back them up. That's where the strategy must shift. Premier Danielle Smith spelled it out. Guarantee the barrels. Translation, provide certainty. Assure pipeline builders that the product will flow. That policy won't change halfway through construction. Those political tides won't stall billion-dollar investments. This isn't a bailout. This is smart governance. Just like underwriting mortgages fuels the housing market, underwriting barrels fuels energy expansion. It's a trust signal that unlocks private capital. But there's more. To truly unleash Canada's potential, we need to reform the regulatory environment that's strangling progress. Approval processes must be streamlined, not skipped, but simplified. Timelines need to be firm, not open-ended, and legal loopholes that allow endless court challenges must be addressed. We also need to unify our infrastructure strategy. Right now, provinces are finally aligning, but Ottawa must step in as a coordinator, not a controller. We don't need the federal government to build the pipelines. We need them to remove the roadblocks. And this isn't just about oil and gas. It's about ports, rail, manufacturing corridors. A full-spectrum economic network that moves products across provinces and around the globe. The United States thrives because its states are connected. Canada has the resources, but we need the spine. This is the strategy. Build from within, reduce reliance on one customer, and unlock the potential of every region by finally treating national development like the national security issue it is. The walkaway was a wake-up call, but the follow-up, the building of a new self-reliant economy, that's the real play. And now it's time to bring it home. Canada didn't walk away in fear. We walked away with purpose. This is more than a trade dispute. It's a declaration, a message to the world. We won't be cornered, controlled, or quiet. The future is being built now, and it's being built by Canada on Canadian terms. Subscribe for more.